Hey there, fellow adventurers. Today I'm going to be reviewing this SlingFin Portal 2 tent. First, I want to start off by saying that I've received no compensation or anything like that as part of giving this review. I actually bought this tent with my own money, and all of these opinions are my own through my own usage of this tent. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let me kind of tell you how I actually landed on this tent. First of all, I have been using a Z-Pax duplex since around 2017, and I really like that tent. However, I found that the requirement of carrying it and using trekking poles with it, I wasn't actually using the poles that often. Actually, like 99% of the time, I was just carrying the trekking poles in my pack. And so I felt like that was not really getting the most advantage out of that style of tent. And when you think about the weight difference between that and poles versus just a regular freestanding tent, it starts to be about equal. And so I was wanting to switch because I felt like I would have more flexibility by having a double wall tent, having the inner tent and the fly. I can actually obviously set up this tent without the fly on and be inside the tent. And I do that a lot when it's nice weather or whatever and you want to look up at the stars, or when you're just sitting in the tent and maybe it's super hot out, or you just got to your tent site and you're all hot and sweaty. I don't throw the fly on actually right away. Typically I'll get inside the tent and then I'll be trying to have my clothes get drier just from my body heat and evaporation. And then once most of my clothes are dry, maybe if it's cold or there's going to be weather, then I'll get out of the tent and I'll throw the fly on. So it really helps with condensation by having that flexibility to have the fly on and off, and not to mention the ability to just get 360-degree views. With the Z-Pax duplex, you're really just getting two views, and mind you, that might be just okay. However, there's some times where you just can't line up the tent right, and so you might be looking at the wrong spot or whatever. So having maybe 360-degree view is also something that is really important to me, because when I'm out there, I'm getting set up and I'm trying to find the most beautiful tent site possible, and I want to be able to look out and see that. So that's just one of the other reasons that drove me towards looking for a different style tent. Okay, so what was my criteria when I was looking for tents? So I was looking for a freestanding double wall tent that was very lightweight, flexible, and very strong. And as I was searching around for tents that fit that profile, I ended up finding the SlingFin Portal 2. I've been using it now for a full season, so this is going to be my second full season using this tent. The tent weighs approximately 3.5 pounds. I actually have the upgraded poles. I got those over the Christmas break, so including the upgraded poles, that adds about 6 ounces. The trail weight, or whatever you would call it, is 3.5 pounds with my lines and stuff on there as well, not including stakes, of course. So first of all, I really like having a two-person tent. I have used a one-person tent before for a full season. I didn't like it because I was going to places that were a lot of rain, and I would be in the tent with all my stuff, and all my stuff would be all wet, and it would be just kind of like piled on top of me, or maybe even out in the vestibule, and I didn't like that. So I want to have all my gear inside a tent, and having also the two doors is also a huge advantage of a two-person tent, and not all two-person tents have two doors, but these style obviously do. And so being able to get in and out on both sides is something that I really like. Now, I don't actually always get in and out both sides, but maybe I'm getting in and out on one side, and maybe on the other side I'm cooking over there, and that could be just the way it works out. It just all depends on the tent site and really what I'm feeling like in the very moment. So what are my likes about this tent? I really like the pockets. It's got a lot of pockets on the corners and then up in the top. And coming from the Z-Pax duplex, where there's really no pockets or storage, having the ability to put things kind of up off the ground is something that now I actually really like with this tent. And that just helps me to maybe keep the tent more organized, or if my stuff is wet or whatever, I can kind of put it up in these pockets and it'll get dry. Or maybe my cell phone gets better reception potentially if I have it sitting up in this area versus sitting on the floor. I don't really know. but having that ability to put things in different spots in the tent within the pockets, I really like that. Another thing I like about this tent, I actually like the color, and not every tent, necessarily gives you the choice of selecting a color from multiple color options. I think SlingFin now is releasing a green and brown tent that maybe some people might like better. I do actually like this color orange, as you can see. I've got that on my shirt today. And the white colored fly here, I also appreciate and like that as well. I think in the summertime, that's huge to have just a light colored tent because it's not going to attract as much sunlight. And if you're in there and it's sunny, you're just going to maybe be a little bit cooler in there. Another thing that I really like about this tent is the thoughtful design I think that they put into it. There's a lot of interesting features about it. It's got double zippers in the poles. There's basically a backup set of poles. So if your zipper fails and it's not working right, you can actually just slide that out of the way and then use these additional poles that are right here. And apparently the zipper pull is the most common thing to fail. I've actually had that fail on my Z-Pax duplex and had to replace that, and it was kind of a pain in the butt. So having that on there is just a real nice to have. Another interesting feature about this tent is that it has this thing here that sits up underneath the peak of the tent here, and it's got little hook Velcro that enables you to attach your trekking pole into that. And as you seat it into that spot and place it underneath there, of course you need to adjust it correctly, but once you put that underneath there, what that does is it increases the strength of the tent. And so you could also put a guy line off of this point right here, and now you're essentially going to have another set of poles for your tent. And if you were camping in somewhere that you had crazy wind or maybe high snow load, you could actually withstand a lot more having that trekking pole on there. Now, I told you I don't really use trekking poles these days, so on this tent I've actually removed that piece, which is kind of nice that it is removable. So I have that flexibility to kind of take things on and off the tent depending upon where I'm going and using things that are specific to the conditions of where that is. So another thing about this tent that I like is the fact that SlingFin recognizes that maybe people want to use this in different conditions that are a little bit more harsh. I often camp in really exposed places that are super windy and want to have the most durable tent that's also lightweight. And so SlingFin offers an upgraded set of poles, which are actually installed on here right now. They're a little bit blue color. They're, I think, just very few millimeters thicker than this, but that gives me extra strength and provides me added resistance to wind and weather when I'm out there camping for kind of a nominal upgrade cost. And then the added weight is also kind of minimal, maybe 5.5 or 6 ounces is what that adds to the tent. So what are my dislikes with this tent? I think one thing that I would say I don't like or think could be a little bit better is that the hardware on the door isn't necessarily the greatest. It's got this really thin line, which is good in the sense that it's lightweight, thin line, but when I'm loosening the little toggle thing, it can actually come off of that line, and so that's not good. I need to not lose that piece in order to be able to hold the door up and open when I want it to be. And so you have to tie extra knots around here to try to keep that from coming loose or sliding off of there. And the other thing is working with that toggle and getting that toggle through this this loop here sometimes can be a little bit finicky, just simply because the line is loose. I think that results in sometimes it just flapping or actually getting stuck in there. So it's just a little bit finicky. It's not the end of the world. Now another thing that I think is somewhat odd, I would say, given the number of tie outs on this tent, on the body end over here on what I think is the foot end, there is not a webbing loop on the body side here on the other side of this tie out. And that I think could be better if there were one here, because on the other end I actually have that tie out there. And what I do is I've got this piece of shock cord. So there's a piece of shock cord here that I attach to the inner part of the tent. And so the fly is attached to the body. And when you stake out the fly, it pulls the shock cord, gives it a little bit of tension, and then it pulls the body of the tent outward. And that can be good because when you're putting things in those pockets that I talked about that I really like, that can actually pull the body of the tent down and in. And so what you, I think, would want is if there was some shock cord there, that could maybe help with just pulling the foot end of the body outward. And that would help with keeping things that are in there from being maybe pulled down and resting on your feet or whatever. I haven't really had any major issues with that. It's just something that I would have liked to have had on this tent. If there was webbing loop there, I would absolutely have that shock cord there, just like I described. You might see there's no vents on the top here. There's ventilation as part of the door. And when you put the door out and you attach this, you're supposed to essentially attach this to some Velcro within the door. And what that does is it now allows air to flow through that gap in the door. And that works. I've done that, and I've used these out in the field in order to ventilate when it's raining or snowing or whatever it was doing. However, these are not attached to the tent. And so my concern or wish would be that they were somehow integrated into the fly so that this isn't some extra piece that I have to carry around and potentially lose. They might argue, well, you know, having it optional and not be on there, maybe you're not going to go somewhere where you don't need it and you just leave it at home. I guess that's a good argument to say that, yeah, you can leave these at home, but if you're bringing the fly with you somewhere, then maybe you actually expect to get rained on or have some kind of weather. You're going to want and need these in the event that you actually have to zip down both of the doors all the way to the ground so that you can get some sort of ventilation in there while you're fully zipped up. Now, as far as those rain vents go, I actually am fortunate in the sense that a lot of the times where I do go backpacking, it doesn't rain. And in California, where I do most of my backpacking in the summertime, honestly, it doesn't rain a heck of a lot. And so these sorts of concerns around the rain or ventilation in the event of rain aren't that big of a deal for me. Now, maybe if you lived in a different area and you spend a lot of time camping in the rainforest, maybe this wouldn't be the perfect tent for you. Maybe you'd have to get something different. I don't know. Just something to think about. All right, now I'm gonna show you what the fly looks like when it's zipped down. And I've got a line on both of the doors themselves, and there is an adjuster on this one, so I'm taking advantage of the built-in line adjuster and able to adjust my line using the built-in one there. On the other door, I have a webbing piece with a line lock on it that's through a webbing that really I don't think is designed to have a stake put through it. So when they put that on there, I think they wanted you or expected you to put some line there. So that's what I've done, and that gives me the ability to stake out either of the doors. Sometimes I stake them out across ways like that. If you're curious, take a look at my line video, which is on my channel, and I go into all that in greater detail. So for now, I'm just going to stake this out real quick and show you what that vent looks like. So that's the ventilation system set up right there with that little kickstand, I guess you could call it. It does allow plenty of air through there. You could also unzip it a little bit further, and it is still protected. If the wind or the rain was blowing into this direction, then I think you'd be okay. Not a lot of adjustability there. I suppose it could be better. Okay, here we are inside the tent. I'm going to show you around. The upper pockets here, I really like these. There's some rings up in this area that enable you to run string, and so I have some line, really thin line that runs through there so I can hang my lights or my shirt or whatever off of there. One other unique and interesting design feature that SlingFin has within this tent is they've actually installed double guy lines or internal guy lines. So there's guy lines outside and then there's guy lines inside, and these run from the corners up to these spots, and then on the outer part of the tent there, the fly has the guy lines that go out and down, and So there's a toggle that attaches that guy line onto the pole, and then this is essentially attached to that. So you're essentially attaching the outer guy line to the inner guy line, and what that does is it helps with that lateral forces. And so when I get in the tent and I'm all fully guy lined out and all my stuff is inside the tent, I get in here and then I just pull these down and adjust it to a good place, and that just helps with keeping the tent more stable. When you get the tent from SlingFin, they ship it to you from the factory, it actually only comes with one set of guy lines, I think down here at the foot end. And so I actually installed these. I had some extra line, and so I have the guy lines on both. So I'm, extra double guy lined out in case I'm in crazy weather. That just helps me out. And I really like that feature of this tent. I don't know that a lot of tents have that, and I think that's pretty cool. So working down towards the bottom here, there's more pockets on the bottom. This one's there's a really big pocket over here that you could put whatever in there, big stuff, I guess. Typically on that end, I have like my dirty socks, my hiking socks that I've been wearing all day that I don't want to have up here by where I'm sleeping and breathing in all night long. And so I, leverage that over there. I also take advantage of these guy lines. I'll hang stuff off of these guy lines, like my shirt or my socks or whatever, and that works pretty well. I prefer to camp in places like this where I can just be out with the fly off maybe and have the doors open. And at that point, maybe, I could just set up on the ground, but I don't want to be cowboy camping necessarily. I'm super paranoid about things like ticks or snakes and tarantulas or whatever kind of bad things would be crawling on you in the middle of the night. And so, if I'm hanging out in here, I'll have both of the doors open like this. And typically I'll only actually close the fly doors if I'm in serious wind or it's cold and I'm trying to warm up a little bit. When I pack up and put away the tent into the carrying mesh sack, I actually leave the doors rolled up like this because I don't want to have to roll up the doors every time I put up the tent and then unroll them and unroll them. And so I'm really only unrolling the doors when there's legitimately weather, and otherwise I'm using it kind of in that style of how the Z-Packs duplex is, where it's just kind of open like this, both doors open, which a lot of tents have that. I know that's not necessarily unique to this tent or that tent, but from my own experience, that was what I was coming from, and so I figure it's worth sharing. It's plenty roomy. I'm able to fit my sleeping pad, which is the wide version of the Uberlight. So I typically keep my pack down at the foot end there, with the fact that it's sometimes sweaty or dirty. I don't want it up here by the head end. That gives me all this room up here to have space for, just my electronics or whatever. And as I'm laying down, I have a lot of room over here. And so I'm getting in and out typically with my pack over there and easily getting in and out, no problem. All right, so what's the verdict? Do I love this tent or do I hate it? I'll tell you, I've been using this tent now since 2022. I've got roughly 30 nights on this tent. And in that time, I've come to really like this tent. I mentioned some dislikes earlier. Now, those things aren't actually making me dislike this tent. They're just things that I think could be improved upon a little bit as they iterate on this tent. Maybe the next version, hopefully they kind of address some of those things or make them a little bit better. One can only hope. Now, I would say that the other things definitely far outweigh any of those concerns that I raised. And this tent, I so far have had no issues with it. It's very reliable. I actually own a couple of SlingFin tents. One of those other tents did have a quality issue with one of the zippers that I noticed the first time I was setting it up. I contacted SlingFin, and they're actually local in the Bay Area, and the guy was driving to Santa Cruz and offered to deliver me a replacement fly. And so they definitely go above and beyond and stand behind their product. So in terms of their company and their reliability, I would say that's also very good, and I don't have any complaints in that sense either. So should you get this tent? I don't know. Are you considering getting a new tent? Do you already have this tent and you're just curious what I think about it? Tell me about it in the comment section. I'd love to hear about what you all are using for tents in 2023, or maybe if you're considering this tent, I can possibly answer some questions you may have about it. So if you enjoyed this video or you got some use out of it, please hit that like button. It definitely helps me out. And if you're interested, hit that subscribe button to catch more outdoor gear and adventure videos. I'll actually be using this tent in 2023 and be probably featuring it throughout my videos and adventures. So subscribe and catch up on all that. All right, thanks. Have a good one.